Welcome everybody, my name is 𝐏𝐨𝐬𝐬 and this is the Market Meditations podcast. We chat with fascinating people from around the world to extract mindsets, routines, stories and habits to help you build richer lives. Meditators, today we had with us Nicholas Merten. He is the CEO of Digifox, the founder of the YouTube channel Data-Dash, one of the biggest in the space, extremely interesting individual who is building a new finance app in the space. He's an entrepreneur, trader, analyst, and one of the nicest people I've met. So you're going to really enjoy this episode. Before we jump into this episode, don't forget that I send hand-picked market news, insights, and education to over 6,000 traders and investors 3 times a week. To get access to this, all you have to do is sign up to 𝐏𝐨𝐬𝐧.substack.com. Meditators, welcome to another edition of the Market Meditations podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got a really special guest with me today, Nicholas Merten. He is the co-founder and CEO of Digifox and Data-Dash. Thank you so much for joining me, Nicholas.
Cheers. Thank you very much, man, for making the time. I appreciate you for having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. How are you feeling with 20K broken just the other day?
Oh, man. I mean, this is a pretty insane moment because it gives me a bit of flashback. I originally had found out about Bitcoin all the way back in 2011. And I guess kind of playing into my story, I had ignored it back then. It was trading at $3 at the time. And I'm like, who would be paying $3 for this digital scam? I was like, I thought it was something that was just preying on libertarians like myself who were looking for an alternative form of money. But basically, long story short, I kept watching over the years. I saw the Silk Road and all these crazy parts of the first major cycle for Bitcoin. And once Bitcoin had gone through its bear market, got back up to the highs at 1,100, that was the real catalyst moment where I knew that, 2013 wasn't a bubble and I had to get in. So in early 2017, I built my first position. I'd been watching it in 2016. And it feels like that moment, man. That's the thing I always emphasize to people. We're just getting started on this.
Oh, so you think it's just started and 2021 is going to be the crazy year and it feels similar to 2017?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we basically, every time Bitcoin breaks through these all-time highs, especially, reflecting on the last cycle, that's the most relevant one we have, where markets were actually liquid. There was a decent amount of traders. This time around, we have something very different, which is this new wave of institutional capital that in the earlier phases could drive up prices pretty quick. But as we get larger and larger, as Bitcoin goes from something like 20K to 40K, hopefully sometime in 2021, it's going to be a lot more difficult to kind of double or triple price as you continue to get up towards these larger valuation and market cap continues to expand. You need much more institutional inflows as there'll be some people profit taking and traders and that sort. So, but I'm very excited, man, overall. I think that my kind of peak target for the cycle, I always like to just give it to people because I know people are like, hey, what do you think Bitcoin's going to? Is around anywhere from, and I know this is a wide range, 100K to 200K. We really don't know what that price target's going to be. Anyone saying the exact number, again, like it's very sporadic. 100K to 200K sometime around in November of 2022. And that plays into a theory that we can talk about that I always believe in called expanding cycles, which is analyzing from bottom to top for each cycle. For the last couple of ones we've had, it tends to be that we add in another 11 to 13 months on average. So that's taking a 12-month average in that case.
So 11 to 13 months in duration of the cycle?
Absolutely. Yeah. Basically what it means is with each cycle, we're adding around 11 to 13 days, 11 to 13 months compared to the previous cycle. So just as an example, let's say if a previous cycle had taken, 40 months in this case, we would be estimating that it would take around 52 months, kind of shooting in the middle between 11 to 13 additional months.
Oh, that's fascinating. So listeners, total treat for them. Straight off the bat, they've got a price target for Ethereum. They've got, for Bitcoin, and they've got a predicted length of time for the bull market. Fantastic. Now, you say the duration is increased, but does this theory also say that the length of the move increases as well? Because I know earlier you just said that institutions coming in, the market cap increasing, the asset becoming more mature does reduce the volatility and upside potential.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my whole estimation from what I've seen with historical cycles, and this is true with Bitcoin as well as any other emerging market, with each cycle you have before the next secondary cycle before the previous one is going to have less returns overall. And along with that as well, it's going to probably take longer. In the earlier phases of this cycle, now that we've broken over the all-time highs, I think that we're going to see, it's not, I think we could very well see a pullback here maybe in the next couple of days, but the more you see these headlines coming through, I think that we're going to, especially these big multi-$100 million to billion-dollar orders, it's no doubt. I mean, it's buy side pressure that's just going to skyrocket Bitcoin and make 5 to 10% moves very common for the next couple of weeks to months. But I think once we get towards 40, 50K somewhere in there, there's going to be some consolidation because you really need that kind of next leg up and capital. And I think the thing that's going to get people excited for that is some kind of speculation or news of an ETF or some kind of mainstream asset, tool that people can own in order to have real kind of backed Bitcoin in a sense, similar to like a gold ETF with actual gold being backed. And that's going to be something that's very important. I think Grayscale has been the leader in the market for the simple fact that when you own GBTC, which is an exchange traded note, which does have a lot of limitations only to accredited investors, they have actual Bitcoin backing it.
Yeah, every time we hear about some billionaire or large institution coming in and buying, it's normally through Grayscale's instrument, which does express the importance of an ETF if we finally get one this time round. And also, I mean, we're slowly moving in the right direction. We had the Ethereum futures instrument come out from CME the other week. And it's just moving in the right direction. Now, Nicholas, is your analysis based off of fundamentals or technicals?
I would say a balance of both. So for me personally, I came from kind of a trader background. I used to trade. I've been in finance for the last 9 years. I haven't worked at any major firms, but I've just been doing personal trading and investing for a couple of years. I started off in equities, investing in kind of emerging tech sectors. So I did, investing in semiconductors, investing in renewable energy, a lot of like kind of emerging industries that gained a lot of traction, had a lot of small mid-cap companies. So a good favor of risk, but also potential reward. And I generally would outperform the market on my more longer term holds or swing trades. But yeah, no, in the sense of like fundamentals versus technicals, the thing about Bitcoin is that fundamentals like only go so far. So it's kind of like look at the fundamentals of gold. I think within a given day, you can understand the fundamental value proposition of most assets in the world. And it's the same as a company as well. You can know what a company builds. And, sure, you can check the financials, but to be honest, things like financials don't really matter that much in the world of trading and investing today. There's a ton of companies, for example, people would say, but, for example, people want to have, they want to check if there's a dividend or this or that. Well, the vast majority of S&P 500 companies or NASDAQ companies don't pay dividends. So it's mainly right now of holding what people resonate with, what companies look like they could be extremely profitable in the future and own market share. In the case of crypto, I do care about technical patterns. I care about momentum. I care about very simple things such as higher lows and higher highs. So when I'm looking at the daily chart or the weekly chart, is the broader trend still signaling momentum and confidence? I really don't use a lot of technical indicators. I think maybe some things like moving averages or things like the MACD, stochastic RSI, they can be additional help overall. But price tells you, in my opinion, more than anything else of what the asset is doing, what the market is feeling. Because if the market is generally selling Bitcoin at lower levels, like so when, for example, we peak out at lower levels and people are buying at lower levels, that tells me everything I need to know. The market generally doesn't have a positive sentiment at the current valuation. And in fact, it's actually a very fundamental way to view Bitcoin because Bitcoin's this digital hedge. If it's making lower highs and lower lows, that tells you, oh, wow, like this is not a good fundamental value for where people find value in Bitcoin. So again, whether you're a trader or not, like I always recommend analyzing price most of all. That's probably my biggest driver.
Well, I like how you don't overvalue indicators. A lot of newer traders like to look at indicators and as some sort of holy grail that's going to finally make them profitable traders. But all of them are derived from price in the end. So there's a connection there, like moving averages, for example. They're very nice because they help you visualize the trend. Nothing more than that. There's nothing special or magical about them. Now, you said something very interesting about being able to see the fundamental value proposition of most assets very quickly, which I agree upon, but now, not looking at the fundamentals for Bitcoin, I can see with gold and the stock market why there's nothing quite revolutionary happening when you invest in, say, an index fund or buy gold. But Bitcoin can entirely change the world as we know it. And it's offering a solution for millions, billions of people around the world who, for example, don't have banks. Things like that can't really be seen in the current price. Would you say, given that only a small percentage of the people in the world actually own Bitcoin right now, is it possible that fundamentals may be a little more important given the sample size of participants in the market is very low right now?
Yeah, that's a fair point overall. Taking a step back on my statement, the key thing to focus on first is that Bitcoin, I use that example, you can usually learn about an asset in a night. Bitcoin is not an example of that, especially if you dive into Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies. Yeah, definitely. It's going to take you a lot longer. And I think overall, I've been in the space, to be fair, for 3.5 years. So I've had the time to kind of digest it. But I can definitely agree with you in that case, Kirish. Like if you look across the world right now, I think Bitcoin can service a lot of different needs. On a broad level, it can be seen as a speculative asset to grow your wealth. It can be seen as a alternative hedge or store of value. People always say Bitcoin's volatile, but the thing is, so long as it's setting generally higher lows and higher highs, and there's a likelihood that when you buy Bitcoin, you're going to sell it at the same price or higher, it serves a store of value. You get your original wealth back in fiat or dollars or euros, whatever the currency may be. And then outside of that, as well as you mentioned, the permissionless freedom of Bitcoin, Ethereum, as well as other cryptocurrencies, that's probably the biggest thing overall. We're having a permissionless financial system that allows people to build anything they want, allows anyone to participate in what they want. It's basically the internet for finance in that case. And the kind of ramifications that has are massive for the simple fact that traditional finance is so inefficient. It's very greed-based, where you have a lot of middle parties who purposefully make things expensive or costly. And because of that, we want to focus on trying to build something that reduces those costs, reduces middlemen, and gives you the absolute best form of opportunity. So I think, Bitcoin was the start of that when it comes to, wealth preservation. But I think as well with Ethereum and other programmable protocols that have smart contracts, we're going to be able to build applications that we can't even imagine right now in 2 to 3 years that are going to change the entire game of finance.
I love that you've moved in this direction, because it was definitely something we planned to do, and that is the unimaginable potential of DeFi, decentralized finance, which is the natural progression of Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's crazy. It's like this little roadmap that's just been playing itself out. And you've actually been focused on decentralized finance since 2017. It's only become hot right now in 2020. Nicholas, how did you spot it early? And did you think it would happen in 2020 and explode like it did today?
Yeah, man. I'm happy to see it's finally taking off. Back then there wasn't even a term really for DeFi. Maybe there was decentralized exchanges, all these terms that were part of the umbrella term DeFi. But long story short, going back, when I launched my YouTube channel back in July of 2017, so it's a crazy thing. It's been over almost nearly 3.5 years. Back then, at the time, there was so many different types of projects trying different avenues in the blockchain space. And originally speaking, coming from a stock market background, being a bit skeptical as much as I was optimistic, I grew kind of hesitant to be is this really a use case for blockchain? I think we were all still feeling out what it could really be used for at the time. And I started to come to the conclusion towards the end of the cycle. It was kind of a sad realization that 98% of the use cases promoted that raised millions, if not billions of dollars of capital for, in these ICOs, they were worthless. There's no need for a blockchain. There's no need for, some type of, computer network to do these things. You can just build a startup that does these.
Yeah.
And the case is that for that 5 to 2% that actually made sense, for me, it was financial services. It just made sense. Bitcoin is an example of a financial service built on a blockchain, because the whole benefit of Bitcoin in this case is that, Bitcoin or Ethereum, you own your own money. You can do whatever you want with that money. You can send and receive it. And in the case of Ethereum, you could actually program certain contracts to put money in and out. So I could give a great simple example that just made it click in my head. I'm not one to bet or want to place bets. But if you and I, in this case, we wanted to bet on Tesla stock going to a certain price, we wanted to basically do a one-to-one bet here, where I believe it's going to be over $500 on a given day, and you believe it's going to be under $500 on a given day. We could basically create a smart contract to do that. And we could put in 5 ETH, you put in 5 ETH, and then whoever wins would get all 10 ETH in that case. in that simple example, there's a great way to realize like, oh, that's a clear value proposition. And you start to realize, well, are there any other value propositions? And you can just go down a rabbit hole and realize there are so many serious applications for cryptocurrency networks. I know maybe betting isn't the bad example, but it's something that is so easy and clear to understand. And now we're seeing basically replacements for banks. We're seeing decentralized deposit pools where you can deposit capital and earn interest. Other people on the other end can borrow that crypto capital, and they can lock in collateral onto the protocol in order to prove creditworthiness. You can have as well decentralized exchanges. Exchanges have been the best use case in the crypto space because people need to buy and sell assets. Now we can not only have decentralized crypto exchanges, we can have decentralized stock trading platforms. We can have decentralized Forex platforms. All this is going to come here, hopefully in the next 2 years. And the potential of that, when you take that market share of all of finance as a whole and you bundle it in to this category of DeFi, so much wealth is going to be driving into this space because people want to pay lower fees. They don't want to have to deal with middlemen or counterparties. And along with that as well, the thing about DeFi being on programmable networks like Ethereum is that it's never down. I can't tell you how many times I've traded on centralized crypto exchanges, Forex platforms, some brokerage platforms where it's down during the most critical moments. And on DeFi, it's on the Ethereum network, which is constantly running. So I think that's one of the great hidden features of crypto that people don't realize just yet.
Well, it's becoming less and less hidden, especially in 2020, where there's been a little bit of a craze. I know people who have made absolutely millions from DeFi. And like you said, it is the future. We can now lend, we can now have exchanges, we can get collateral, we can borrow money. It's incredible. But often with these exciting things that are quite revolutionary, people severely overestimate how quickly they're going to be adopted, but underestimate the long-term impacts. Do you think right now, given the DeFi craze, we're overestimating a little bit how quickly this is going to be adopted?
Absolutely. I agree with you on that, Krish. I mean, basically what I would say, just as like kind of an equivalent example, I'm a very visual person and stuff, and I view things in macro terms like 5-10 year timeframes. So in that point, like, the next 2 years as we go through this bull market, there's going to be a lot more use cases of DeFi, some of which, again, like I mentioned a few of them earlier, like decentralized markets for other types of assets, decentralized, deposit pools, all kinds of different things for derivatives, et cetera. That's going to start to eat up finance. But the thing is that you can even build some of those applications here in the next 2 years and they can work pretty good. The problem is the user experience isn't there yet for most people. And along with that, we need to see more of these being time tested, audited, and also make sure, when you're dealing with money, especially in crypto with digital assets that are, basically once you send a transaction, it's pushed through, it's immutable. So you need to get things right from the get-go. And because of all those traits, I think that we're not going to see any kind of serious user growth for some time. And this is going to be equivalent to like the .com bubble. We'll have about maybe 5 or 7% of the real tangible market come into DeFi during this time in crypto over this next cycle. So it'll be a big leap from where we're at less than 1%. But at the same time, I think this is going to be a decade-long to 2-decade-long journey. I mean, when you really think about it, there's a lot of people who are still in markets who need this technology, but I can be realistic in saying they're probably not going to be able to get it for the next couple of years. And the reason being is because, as I mentioned, there's a lot of things. But when you really get self-critical of the space and you see things time and time again, you realize just how many flaws there still are in this space. And we're all just gung-ho on, oh, it's perfect. How do people not just get the technology? I mean, you got to make it easy for people. Just like every other company makes services easier and more convenient. And that's not a problem of the consumer or the user. It's a problem of businesses not adapting. So, again, I completely agree with you that that's a very valid thing. I would say that this is going to be a decade to 2-decade long journey. But on the macro scale, this will absorb a lot of traditional finance, maybe not all of it, but a good amount where it doesn't require human contact in that case. So we're already seeing bank branches, starting to shut down. We're seeing brokerage platforms going completely digital like Robinhood. It's starting to get there. So we'll see. But I think it's trillions of dollars of potential wealth overall.
It's definitely moving in the right direction. And I love how you're able to have a very bipolar mindset with these sorts of things. You try to take into account all the different possibilities and variables and come to a very balanced conclusion, which is one of the reasons we get along so well, Nicholas.
Yeah.
One thing you said, which was very interesting, was that a big problem right now is the user experience. And I know that's very, very important to you. And you strongly believe that the way to push crypto, DeFi, decentralized finance forward, and the blockchain space in general is to make it easier for people to get involved and to get into the space. And that's probably one of the reasons you founded Digifox.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah. So, being in the crypto space for the last few years, kind of observing what was going on in the industry, I realized there was a ton of flaws, predominantly user experience, making things simple and easy to use, and, being mainly focused on desktop versus mobile. I think that's a huge issue because you cut out a lot of users in that case who really need it. But along with that as well, like being in finance for the last 9 years, I kind of realized there was a lot of broad issues that really have macro effects on the general public. So the three major issues that I found, I tried to pinpoint it to just what are the three critical issues here, right? There's dozens of them, but the biggest one is that right now, even if you have access to every financial service you could ever dream of, you need a dozen different applications. So getting anyone to go through KYC 12 times, to do a bank deposit, connecting their bank, all this complex stuff, and then also just even understanding it and knowing what platforms to choose, it's too much. Savings rates in the United States and many other developed countries across the world are near 0%, if not negative. And I know that's the case in the UK. It's sitting, I think, around a 0.25%. Same here in the United States, Canada, many other countries now starting to go towards 0% as well. That's a big issue because that means savings accounts are earning practically nothing. Just here in the United States, there's $9.2 trillion not earning interest at the moment, or basically earning practically nothing. And the third component is that money is way too slow when in regards to transfers, as well as dealing with, in this case, high fees. So to understand the true cost of getting money from point A to point B, we have to take into consideration debit cards, wire transfers, remittances, peer-to-peer payment applications. If you consider all of those together, you're talking about well over $1 trillion of costs to send money from point A to point B, whereas I can send you a message completely for free on Facebook or email. So these are the three biggest issues we need to resolve, and we need to resolve them as immediately as possible. And that's why I decided to build Digifox, which I self-funded from the get-go, and we also did an equity crowdfunding. And the basic thing is that it's an all-in-one financial application that allows anyone across the world to be able to own their own money, to be able to earn interest, make trades, and along with that as well, send payments. And we're working constantly to improve it. It's not all of your financial services just yet. I'm very humble in that sense in saying that, we still want to do stock trading services. We want to do retirement planning and budgeting, and also more consumer-based activities for shopping. There's all kinds of things we want to add to the application over the next few years. But just launching back 6 months ago, we've already been able to grow to 14,000 users across the world, mainly doing crypto trades and earning interest. And right now you can earn up to 10% interest on dollars, in this case, through the form of stable coins such as USDC. And you can also earn interest on your crypto like Ethereum and Bitcoin. And you can also make trades in a decentralized fashion for lower fees than some of the vast majority of exchanges. So we charge 1/3 of the fees for Digifox than what you have to pay for Coinbase or some of the other major kind of exchanges where you get started.
Nicholas, that is explosive growth. 14,000 users in that short a time period. Were you expecting it to blow up like that?
I'm usually pretty humble overall in the sense that I don't expect too much in this case. I always try to keep my estimations very conservative. At the same time, I'm kind of a visionary type too, where I want it to reach 100,000, 1 million. But I understand as well, how markets scale out. You have an S curve in this case usually when you have your catalyst moment. I think we're on the cusp of that here in the next few months. But I was very, very happy because if coming from working in the startup world, I worked in Silicon Valley for a little while at a project management software company. I understand that very hard grind where you have to win over the trust of people, get people sharing word of mouth. And it takes about 1 year to 2 years to do that. And then you just start to compound your growth. It just goes up and up and up. And that's when you start getting to 100K, 500K, 1 million, 2 million, start to really grow.
Now, hopefully that S-curve moment comes for you guys. But for it to come, it's actually a pretty competitive space now, which is why the explosive growth is so impressive because obviously you have the visionary goals. 14K users is still incredible. What separates Digifox from a lot of the other competitors in the space trying to do similar things right now? I know you've mentioned Coinbase, but I mean, perhaps more niche ones that are offering pretty good rates for you to farm with right now and earn interest on. What separates Digifox?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing overall that separates Digifox is that we see ourselves as an aggregation platform. So you'll notice when you go through the application, all of the services that are within the application are some of the best providers on the market. Whether it be in the case of our deposit partners where you're in interest, such as Celsius and Compound, they're the leading providers in CeFi and DeFi, kind of centralized finance. So Celsius actually custodies assets like a traditional bank, and in the case of Compound, it's an autonomous smart contract with a lot less trust. We also have for our trades Uniswap. So Uniswap allows you to trade into thousands of different tokens across the globe. And we pick out some of the top tier ones here for you in a simplified list. And eventually we'll allow you to trade any token you want through Uniswap. And outside of that as well, payments, they're peer-to-peer in this case. So you're not dealing with middlemen. You're just paying basically a network fee. And eventually we're going to get that down to nearly nothing. So the major thing overall is that we're trying to be that platform that does everything for you. Most applications, like for example, like Celsius or Compound or Uniswap, they are great platforms. We have them integrated to the app because we trust them. The thing is that they usually provide one core service and they do a damn good job of it, right?
Yeah.
So what we want to basically do is plug in some of the best providers across the world. We filter through great companies who have great security standards and don't charge high fees. And outside of that as well, we want to, again, give that human element. One of the biggest things that I have struggled to find, whether it's in traditional finance and in crypto, is a lack of real customer support and someone on the line that I can just talk to. I mean, when you're dealing with your money, when the markets are moving crazy, it's just so nice to have someone on the other line and stuff. So we basically have text-based communication within the app where you can reach customer support, ask questions when you're getting started. And I always tell people, don't hesitate, reach out to us if something feels like scary. Just give us a chat, you ping us. And I'm a big believer in that, because that's the experience that I wanted in crypto for all these years. And knowing that you can get someone on the line in an hour or two and ask them something, I mean, that's the world of difference when it comes to finance, especially when you're just getting started. So I would say those are kind of our two big selling points overall. But we're also going to be adding a bunch of additional features as well that I think will really make us stand out in the long run.
Well, I think it's incredible that a CEO with 14,000 users, and I saw this tweet from you this morning, still takes the time to message their customers, make sure the customers are happy, handle their issues. You don't, the humility you've talked about a few times, but you don't feel you're above that in any way. And humility definitely is actually a variable trait. I've seen both extremes, very successful people that embrace the humility and also explosive egos that manage to achieve high levels of success. It seems to be the explosive ego allows people to be visionaries and believe that they can do great things, and that often leads to that. Do you ever feel the humility can be negative rather than a positive?
That's actually that's an interesting philosophical question. I would say overall, the humility has helped me a lot in the sense that, it's on a strategic basis. So if you think about it, when you're working on an application, like something like Digifox or some kind of application where you have this whole new influx of users, not taking the time to understand what they're struggling with, what they're seeing, and what I'm not seeing in this case, for that matter. That gives me so much insight. If I can be open, mature enough to take candid feedback, whether good or bad, to know my strengths and my weaknesses, or the company's strengths or weaknesses. In that case, I can get a very good bird's eye view of what are the biggest issues for people that we need to fix? How can we grow our company? What do people care about most? I think that humbleness really helps in that case, the humility, as you mentioned, and being a CEO. And along with that as well comes with like a team. So for example, when I chat with my team, I don't barge into the room saying, this is what we're going to do, right? I don't think that's what a visionary does. A visionary brings on great people smarter than themselves and really looks around the room and says, hey, so and so, what do you think about this? Like, what do you think about our design? What do you think about product? What do you think about how we're marketing and branding? I think that's a very, very good approach to being like a CEO with humility in that case. And it's also just good personally because people like to work with someone who gives them a voice, as well as you're working with a customer. Now, in the case of that kind of dichotomy between having like the ego-driven CEO, kind of like, I don't mean this in a mean way, but kind of like the Steve Jobs mentality, where like you've got the design and vision, right? I think that's perfectly fine in some companies. The problem is that in the long run, in most companies, you're going to cause a lot of problems when, if, for example, your ego-driven vision of the product is not the perfect one. So I'll give you the case for Digifox, for example. I learned a lot from our designer, Madison. She's been on board with me from the get-go alongside our lead engineer, Chase. And the thing is that both of them have provided such great feedback. They've taught me a lot about the technology. And the great thing is that from them, if I didn't have them and take feedback from them, I would have completely missed the gun on what kind of product we could build. They've had a lot of unique ideas that have helped build it. Outside of that as well, and in the sense of being the kind of that ego-driven CEO, I think another big problem with that is that you're not someone who's favorable to work with. Customers don't like it, and that's going to stunt a lot of growth, in my opinion. It just also doesn't leave you in a good mindset, I think, overall. I've had moments of time where I'm like, look, let's just do it this way and stuff. But I learned more and more over the last decade that it's like, you know what, like, take the time to listen to people. And it's the same way I work with my employees, the same way I'd talk to my friends in that case. Be willing to be open and listen, and also collaborate as best as possible.
Yeah, it makes sense. And as you were describing it, I had the vision of when you do take that high ego approach, you already have the end vision in mind and you go headstrong into that, which is sort of like a very high leverage play. If you're right, it's going to work out really, really well because you'll be moving swiftly and there won't be much iteration. But 99 out of 100 times, you're not going to be perfectly right first time, regardless of how clever you are. There are too many variables involved, so it won't work. So it's kind of like a high leverage move to go with that approach. Now,
I like the market analogy in that case of using leverage. That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a very good way to communicate concepts, especially when we know our listeners are traders, investors, entrepreneurs, and many of them view the world in that risk to reward way. Trading, what we do, it really does skew our view of the world. It makes us see it in a certain way, not skew as in deviate from reality, but just warp it to a different lens rather.
Absolutely.
So with all the possibilities, I mean, I'm not quite as big a platform as you, but in a smaller way, do have access to the immense amount of opportunities that come being in such a young, thriving space. You mentioned earlier how it's imperfect. The space is imperfect. We're so far from where we could be. But that's exactly why there's so much opportunity here. That's why there's so much potential to build profitable things, build things which deliver a lot of value. Why, of all the things you could have done, did you choose Digifox?
Oh man, that's a good question. For me, on a personal note, there's really two things. One, on a selfish reason, I really have always wanted to build a company. I've tried different startups in the past. You can even see maybe Data Dash was an attempt at a startup, but really, ironically, Data Dash was the one thing I actually didn't try to do as a YouTube channel. I'd had a dozen different YouTube channels in the past, doing very generic things. I think a lot of people are doing like gaming channels and things of that sort. But the thing is that Data Dash ended up working because it was in my strong suit of finance, and I was really shocked that people wanted to listen to me. So that was basically, even though that was great, I felt I didn't want to do YouTube long term. In a sense that I love doing YouTube today, but I didn't want that to be the only part of my legacy in that case as an individual. So I wanted to build something that actually left impactful change in the world, people use, and I could see people using to pay for things, to invest in. And the second thing as well is that I kind of thought to myself, if not me, then who in this case? Because I've looked around at this space for 10 years, or sorry, not 10 years, but since 2011 and stuff, since I knew about Bitcoin. And it was all too complex. And especially when I got involved in the space in 2017 and 2016, I saw that like still there were so many problems. And when I look at traditional finance, it's been around for thousands of years. Still so many problems. Like the core issues that make finance have such a bad rep still persist. And all the people that have gotten left behind, the 1.7 billion people across the globe who are unbanked, the over 2.2 billion who are underserviced or underbanked. I can't sit by, and I would actually say probably all 7 billion of us, outside of very few select people, are completely
Yeah.
unbanked. But that's the overall kind of thing that I want to work towards fixing. If we can fix finance, if we can create something that uplifts the lives of a billion people in the long run, man, I can die a happy person. That's going to make me very happy. And then I'll move on to go do some other things. If it does phenomenally well, if I make money from it, okay, so what? Like, I don't care about money. I want to go build other things. That's a fun part of life.
It's crazy how it's difficult to communicate to people. Anyone you tell that once you get money, it stops mattering, it stops meaning anything, and you need to find new purpose. It's a very empty goal. You're never going to be driven long term just chasing money unless you never get that money. And anytime you say that, people respond, you're only saying that because you have money. Only people with money say that. It's such a hard thing to communicate.
Yeah, exactly. The thing I always say is I take that kind of, as you mentioned, that kind of, I don't know, bipolar kind of like split view where it's like, I do understand the reality. It having 20K a year salary versus 200K is going to make you probably a lot more happy if you generally like your job and stuff. Financial freedom is fantastic, and it's why I'm so set on trying to expand financial freedom for people. So I get that argument very clearly on the other side, but at the same time, like, there will get to a point, and I would say I'm a very frugal person. I don't have a crap ton of money or anything, but the thing is, for me, I'm very frugal and very simple overall. Where I'm like, no, I don't really need to buy much. So for me, I don't need much money to be like, set in a sense, like where I'm just kind of like, I'm fine. I feel calm where I am and stuff overall. And so long as I have some kind of consistent income coming in, in that case, I put money to investments, I put it to work. And eventually you get to this point here, especially working in an emerging industry like crypto or something, where you feel like you're like, okay, I'm set on all the basics. Now let me go ahead and focus on what I want to do for the world, like what I can do for others. And that's the thing, is the moment you can start working on something that you really love, that just flips the switch here in regards to your attitude on life. I think overall it really puts you to like a new level. And I always appreciate it looking back on that stuff, having that opportunity, because I know not everyone has that. So I have to do the best job. It's kind of almost like I see it as a responsibility. Like, if you have that opportunity, if you have that kind of wealth, take it and do as much as you can. If not, if you don't know how to be a CEO or a founder, invest in someone else who does know how to do it. Like, that's why I can see like why there's a ton of like funds or investors and stuff who do that for a living, angel investors
Yeah.
more specifically. So
Nicholas, have you ever meditated?
Yeah. So I've done meditation before. Funny enough, I'm very into like kind of alternative things. So I love, especially anything that's relating back to health. I've done meditation before. I'll be honest, I'm not in the routine of doing it now. I need to get back into it. But I've also done, for example, I just actually today finished a 6-day water fast.
Oh,
So
wow.
literally just drank water over the last 6 days, and I'm like slowly refeeding or starting to read again. But yeah, I've done all kinds of different alternative things. I've done the ketogenic diet. So I was in ketosis for 3 months without breaking it, without cheating. What else have I done? I work out a lot and everything. So I like to take care of health overall and try new things for sure.
Nicholas, before we move on, water fast for 7 days? Does that mean you've had nothing but water for the last 7 days and you're on here to talk with me for an hour? And I'm guessing you've been running the company as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So we went through we went through our product launch for Digifox 2.0, and I somehow was able to do customer support, social media relations, and a few other things and stuff to make sure everything still stayed alive while I was just living on water. And I think it proves overall. I don't mean to say that, like, again, not in an egotistical way at all. I think a lot of people are capable of that. The thing is it's just a matter of like, if you love what you do, and along with that as well, you push yourself to this point where you're disciplined and you try new things. You realize that, and another thing I was saying is like cold showers, and it could be equivalent to that
Yeah.
as well, where like you realize like you can do a lot of things that you may not believe you can do. And I always love that kind of mindset. I know it sounds kind of like a kind of, I'm like being like a perky optimist and kind of like overthinking things, but really, like, I love pushing myself. Like, if there isn't a challenge in life, why, what do you do in life, So I think you can make challenges for yourself. Everyone has the right to go out and take a cold shower, has the right to go out and try some diet, has the right to go starve yourself from food in that case, and test your body's limits, because you start to realize you can do so many things. But again, I always recommend doing anything like that, get a medical advisor, do your research on it. Don't just jump into anything. But you don't want to go off and jump off a bridge or anything like that. You have to be smart about what you do. So yeah, again, overall, like I'm someone who, if I have the chance and I feel like I'm knowledgeable enough on it, then I like to take the challenge. It's fun.
It's incredible because I've been talking to so many CEOs, founders, investors, and traders in this space. And with successful people, you do start to see a lot of similarities. And two key traits I've spotted in you right now is one, that ridiculous desire to just push yourself beyond your limits. Like we had, I'm not sure you're familiar, but Joel Birch on the other day. And he's got this similar mindset, that switch in the brain that says, I need to challenge myself. When I set to do a task, I will do it no matter what, like a 7-day water fast. And while launching the product, he actually gave himself a heart attack because he dieted and did cardio so hard to lose like a crazy amount of weight in 3 months. But it's crazy, but it's what you kind of need, because being a CEO is tough. You work really, really hard, and the ROI on time is not that much. You need the second trait, which I'm about to mention, and that is a goal higher than yourself. This one took me a while to realize, and it's something which flipped the switch for me, but without me even realizing it. Once you no longer are doing something for yourself, it's easy to sacrifice. It's easy to suffer and keep moving forward.
You're absolutely in that case. The second point, I think, is close to heart for me personally. I don't think I've really ever kind of put it in those terms and stuff, but I completely agree with you. I think that's a perfect way to describe it. When the case of Digifox, for example, right? There's a lot of inefficiency in finance. Finance is a massive market. It could be a successful company, and being a majority stakeholder and stuff, yeah, I could do well with it. But for me, it's like, I don't, it's like you said, money doesn't matter. And I'm at the point where you're building something where it's like, man, like this could impact a lot of people, like people who I'll never get to meet, people who don't know my name, and I think that's a pretty cool feeling. Like, we live in this age where you can help people. I'm here in the United States on the East Coast, being able to help someone over in the Philippines or in Argentina, or someone who might be a couple blocks down the road who I'll never get to meet, like who doesn't, and I think that that's so cool. Like that ability to have something that can scale so large and have such a large impact, hopefully a positive one, that's an incredible feat, man. And I think overall, dude, with your content, the way you're going about doing, I think your YouTube channel is phenomenal at doing that in the crypto space. We need more educators and people who are helping individuals getting started, and especially in a complex space like finance. So it's every step you can do. And I always tell people as well, the big problem in a lot of people's mindset when they go about this journey of wanting to help others, they get caught up in the idea that it has to be the next Facebook, or it has to be the next, Amazon or something. You don't have to create some major tech company or major startup that grows to be the next big company to have an impact on the world. You can create a nonprofit. You can help out at like a local soup kitchen and stuff. I know those don't sound maybe as glamorous, and maybe they're not, but to me personally, I think overall, if you don't have those things in this life, there's people who aren't going to receive those services, who need them. So, again, whether it's a local small business, something like that sort of, that's again a bit more humble in that case, and maybe smaller. Again, overall, it's still leaving a big impact on the world, because if hundreds of thousands of us do it, then it starts to leave serious material change. So above all, man, I think that's the mindset to have. It goes back to that point of humility and humbleness, where it's like, if there's a problem at your company or there's a problem going on in your personal life, you try to push it aside as quick as possible and say, look, guys, we have to focus on the vision here. What are we doing? How are we leaving an impact? What are we messing up on? What can we do best for others in this case?
Well, Nicholas, I really do appreciate you, one, having this great mindset and spreading this message to all of our listeners, especially as you were naming places around the world. I do know that our highest listener base is just this one place in the south of the Netherlands. So from the south of the Netherlands, I don't know why, there just seems to be a huge viewership. So this message will get to that one random location. I thought that fact would be a little fun for you. I also really appreciate you talking about leveraging myself as an example of someone doing good, because I do truly believe education. That is one of the main ways I've found to push usability for people. Because one, you can make things which are easier to use, but also you can make the information to use these things more readily available to people. And that's why I'm quite a big proponent of sharing almost everything I put out for free, because that value will come back to me. I don't even need to think about that. I just need to push it out, do good things, and that stuff comes back around. It's just how it generally works. And on the topic of education, let's move away from crypto, because we started the conversation talking about Bitcoin, your predictions, where you think it's going to go. We got the juicy price target of 100K to 200K. But traditional finance is also something which, judging by this conversation, I think you'll agree with me that no one should be 100% crypto. There are very few cases where that makes sense, and there are a lot of other places and a lot of other things you can do with your wealth. What are your thoughts on different asset classes and traditional finance?
Yeah, I mean that's where I got my grounding in and stuff. I completely agree with you that any kind of sound portfolio probably isn't all in on crypto or any asset class. I know people who are all in on Tesla or all in on gold. And the thing is that if you do any of those, that's very either high risk or you're possibly limiting yourself from potential basically rewards.
There's no humility in it.
Yeah, there's no humility. It's very true. Estimating the worst case scenarios, which you should always do as an investor. Yeah, so in that case, other asset classes that I'm interested in, of course, I find a fascination in equities. I do like investing in different companies. To me, what I realize is it's just like crypto. You'll start to realize this when you trade and invest in markets, that really going on that point of fundamentals, it's not that fundamentals don't matter whatsoever, but a lot of the time it's really a matter of putting your money where the trend is, right? Like where people are getting excited. And I think Tesla is a great example of this, right? Tesla's a phenomenal company. Its fundamentals have been improving, but the biggest reason people are buying is because they resonate with the story. They resonate with what the company's doing. And that's why the stock has ballooned over towards around, I think, like $500-600 billion. So it's been this like huge growth spurt in this past year from, $40 to $50 billion last year. And again, that proves in that case that idea of like focusing on emerging sectors. So like I mentioned earlier with trading, I like to invest in things that are forward-looking, renewable energy, semiconductors, technology. But I also as well I like to broaden out into some different kind of more generic sectors as well. I think that that's important for just kind of more stability in that case for your portfolio. And then outside of that as well, I do like commodities. I not only like to hold precious metals like gold and silver, so I have a little bit of physical, but I'll own some paper ETFs in that case to track the price. But for me, I also find fascination in like niche commodity markets. So I've tracked uranium, natural gas, all kinds of things like that. Oil as well there was a big call in our Dash Report newsletter that I put out back about 2 years ago, where I was saying oil is going to be going down to the $20-40 range it historically traded in, and people are like, oil is kind of boring and stuff. Well, there was a great short opportunity because it was $80 at the time. So there's so many opportunities across the board, and you can even trade a bit of leverage on it and stuff and do very well. I find Forex interesting, but I think Forex really requires a very specific personality type. It is not the market for day trading, in my opinion. It's something where you use moderate leverage and you look at like 6-month trade positions, like something where I generally see the trend on the broad term is going to switch to this or it's going to go this way. So yeah, I think I'm not really into property. What else is there that I'm not thinking about? Like rentals as well. I think all that stuff can be good for sure. There's nothing bad with it. I've never dove down that kind of rabbit hole, and I know there's a whole other thing for me to learn there. But I would say crypto and equities are primarily by far. They're fast moving. There's so much variety, and I like that above all.
So you invest in not broad-based index funds, but more specific sectors and companies that you believe in. Given you live and breathe crypto at this point, and you're so involved in the crypto markets, what makes you think you can find the edge there? Because I fully agree with you that those are forward-moving sectors, renewable energy, electric vehicles, maybe not Tesla specifically, as most people will agree it's inflated, but What makes you think the information isn't already priced in and that you have an edge there when you're so focused on crypto right now?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think generally speaking, what I learned over the last few years when it comes to like kind of like, emerging sectors when they're in their like mid cap value range, and that's somewhere between like where the majority of the major companies in the industry are like between
Mhm.
$1 billion to maybe 3 billion. Um, for me, I can see in this case that they usually lack profitability. They usually lack one or, for example, maybe the sector hasn't reached like their catalyst moment where, like in the case of solar, it's not on every rooftop and everything. You have to see these things about 5 to 10 years out because investors invest in the here and now. Most of them, in this case, it's difficult to believe that, but the vast majority of people invest in a day-to-day time frame. The same goes with crypto. So if you can just kind of say like, well, wait a minute, so I need to invest my money for the next 5, 10 years, and then I'll find another industry. Like, for me, it was like back in the day, I looked at solar. I was really early to the cusp of like the cannabis boom. In that case, I know that was big on a lot of the Canadian stocks. Um,
How did you
I
spot
spotted
that, Nicholas?
Yeah, I was following the trends in like Colorado and Washington, a lot of the states that were starting to come up, and I realized that with all these kind of shifts in like whether it's technology or just market shifts, cannabis per se isn't really so much technology, but the thing I realized is that there's a pendulum of either optimism or incentive. So in the case of cannabis, I was realizing that okay, so we've got Colorado and Washington caving in and basically legalizing in this case rather than
Yeah.
keeping it as a legal trade. And that's the early slight bump of the notch or the pendulum, where it's like, okay, we've got a trend starting here. And now this is something that I always kept conservative. It's not going to happen in a year or two. It's going to be about a decade process. It usually tends to be like that. And then as you start to get more and more states and more jurisdictions and more open, rather than just decriminalizing, they start to medicinally legalize it or recreationally legalize it. The market grows larger and larger and larger and larger. And once you reach that catalyst moment where you get about 50%, things move very, very quick. And that's where we've gotten to this point now where I think the vast majority of the states in the US either have it decriminalized, medicinally legalized, or recreationally legalized. And I'm not I don't smoke pot and stuff. I'm not really into cannabis. I'm very transparent about what I do and what I don't do and stuff. But for me, I don't really enjoy it. But the major thing overall is it's like, I don't care if I enjoy it or not. Then this is, I think, a problem sometimes where people just invest in what they like. I invest because I know there's going to be a market there. And I think, again, I have no problem with legal cannabis in that case. Same goes here for renewables. I think that renewables are a step in the right direction, but I don't just invest in them because, I really resonate with renewables. It's because in this case, I know that this is going to be a growing portion of the energy sector. It's hiring more people in the US than traditional energy in the sense of new jobs. The new actual gigawatt generation and stuff is being outpaced by renewable energy. So all of these things are trends. They're things that get on that pendulum that start to make it very clear, like, this is where I put my money. And the thing is that not many people can see that overall. And you don't have to have like the absolute market insight data because even people who really, 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 really know what's going on either are positioned in it already with the capital they have, or they sometimes still see it as too high risk to put any substantial amount of capital that actually leads to the influx in price. So I think in that case, you don't even have to be a whiz. You don't even have to pick the Apple or the Microsoft. You just pick companies in that industry and you'll still do pretty well overall.
So, have you picked specific companies in these industries that you believe in, or have you taken indexes?
So what I usually do is I usually don't invest in broad indexes unless like if every company is really uncertain. But the thing is you can kind of build your own custom indexes. So if you take a little bit of extra time to kind of like see like what the charts look like, how the
Mhm.
company's moving, like what market performers are in the lead. I usually kind of build my own custom indexes where I pick 3 or 4 or 5 companies from these sectors, and you usually can outperform a lot of the ETFs and or broad indexes for these sectors. So yeah, that's how I usually approach it. When I'm investing in a sector, I'll invest in anywhere from like 2 to 3 companies to 4 to 5 companies.
Could I ask what sectors are on your radar right now?
Yeah, so we basically one of the things we wrote about in the Dash report was the solar sector. As retail traders came back in, I kind of missed the early wave of it, but I realized that after it made a substantial move, as much as people would say it was overbought, I was like, no, this thing's going to keep going. This sector is now in its secondary wave, and I remember what happened in solar when it had its last bull market. So solar, wind, all kinds of different renewable industries. I even know as well things like hydrogen fuel cells, all types of different industries and stuff that really offer some kind of new growth potential and playing a role as a larger piece of the pie in the energy sector. So that's the stuff that interests me. And along with that as well, the sectors that I would say I'm interested in, I think technology constantly has a room to grow, but technology is such a broad term overall. I'm really waiting to find that kind of next, juicy sector to kind of get a piece of the pie of and stuff. But I don't really have too many right now. I think energy is that kind of, emerging energy is kind of the focus I have right now. But there's definitely going to be some other things as well.
Well, that was fascinating. Again, I think our listeners are going to absolutely love this very direct alpha. Normally, people do talk around these topics because they're so hesitant to give direct recommendations, or not that you were giving recommendations, you were just talking about your own opinions. Silver and gold, you mentioned that, but you said it's not a primary focus. What role does that have in your investment philosophy on a macro level?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've just looked, for example, I've really flipped my tone on gold and silver. It's not that I am bullish on them. I think they will go up. And there's maybe even a chance, we're at the tail end of a equity commodity cycle, basically, where equities are way overvalued. Commodities are very undervalued, historically speaking, where I think that, gold and silver could maybe outperform equities over the next decade or start to at least rebound in some capacity to a significant degree. But I also take into consideration that as I've seen Bitcoin and digital assets coming into the scene, that they could really steal the show from gold and silver. The reason I say this is because, a lot of people say, oh, gold has industrial use cases, right? It has industrial uses. And I think that that's, it's a fair point. About 5, maybe 10% is used in industrial use cases in cell phones, other specific semiconductors for computers or devices. But the majority of gold is usually in the form of 3 use cases. It's in jewelry, it's in vaults for private funds, or it's owned by central banks. So let's think about it there. What are they doing with that gold? It's just sitting there. Well, they're using it as a store of value. And that's a great use case. Storing wealth, I mean, that's massive, So especially for such a time-tested asset and commodity. So I would say I'm not bearish on gold and silver, but I don't see, a big day for gold is 1 or 2%.
Yeah.
To me, someone who's a little bit more high risk and looking at emerging sectors, that's a given day. Like it moves of 2 or 5% in crypto or Bitcoin's price. That's everyday kind of stuff now. Where we just over the last few days we've moved up more than 10% from the all-time high. So in that case, I'm actually probably around 15%. So yeah, for me, that's the kind of stuff that interests me. And then later on, once I've made great profits, if I don't really know where to put it, I put it back into more safe assets like gold and silver.
Interesting. So as your risk tolerance decreases, you will increase exposure to assets like silver and gold that you expect to perform well, but with very relatively low volatility.
Precisely. Yeah. So if you don't know where to put your money and stuff, the best thing above all is to, this is actually an important point. So I think savings as well. I know that's something that we kind of talked about in a negative sense, but one of the biggest services we offer in Digifox in this case, that's different from a traditional bank, is actually an interest rate where you can earn high interest on your savings. So right now you can earn 10% interest on your savings in Digifox, which is well over 100 times more than what you're going to earn at your bank, because the market itself is not tied towards the Fed funds rate. Outside of that as well, you don't have a bank who's taking 25%, 30% profit margins in between all the interest that they charge to borrowers and not paying you any. So I would say savings accounts are perfectly fine as well. But the biggest point I can say overall is just that broad diversification into a lot of emerging, interesting sectors. So you're on the high risk tailwind of things, but you also mitigate that risk by being, betting on a lot of different high risk, exciting things. Because if even just 2/3, 2/3 or 1/3 of those sectors do well, you'll outperform any major index portfolio, broadly speaking.
That's a fantastic point, Nicholas. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a really exciting episode for me. I love the similarities in mindset, the humble approach, the ability to take lots of different variables and come to a very well-rounded opinion. It makes it very easy and interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with before we end this episode?
Oh man, well, I just want to say the pleasure is all mine to be here, and also thank you to everyone for listening. I love these kind of conversations where you can just kind of dive into a lot of different topics. I mean, I guess if people want to maybe learn a bit more about myself, you can always check me out at Data Dash on YouTube. You can just search it and you'll be able to find it. And then along with as well, I'm on Twitter, Nicholas_Merten. And then also, if you want to, get into the crypto space overall, you can check out Digifox. It's available on iOS and Android. But above all, the major kind of lesson I want to share is, again, to remain humble and have a sense of humility with everything. I really appreciate that comment, Kurish, about I really sometimes don't know how to put things into words. And I think that that's something that's really, helped me shift over the last few years, just kind of taking on that mindset, practicing it every day. And just constantly keeping open to the idea that you don't know everything. There's something new to learn. There's something new to challenge yourself to. There's somewhere you can push yourself to. The more someone can build that kind of mindset, they'll start building the entrepreneur mindset and be able to create a lot of value in the world.
And it makes life more interesting, more fun, more exciting. It makes you more likable. There are a whole bunch of benefits around it. Meditators, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Market Meditations podcast. I'll see you again next time. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Market Meditations podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like us to continue bringing you fascinating people from across the world, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you like to listen to these podcasts, and share the episode with a friend. If you have feedback or an idea for a potential guest, reach out to me on Twitter at 𝐏𝐸𝐻, and do not forget we write a newsletter covering all important topics in crypto and traditional markets. We send it out 3 times a week. The Market Meditations newsletter. You also get early access to these episodes, and you get transcripts and extra notes as well, so make sure to subscribe there as well.